Good afternoon. This is the Torah on this week's Parshat Beha'aloscha, and it's quite an eventful Parsha. Last week's Parsha ended with the gifts of the 12 princes. Each gave a different gift. They were identical but had different meanings to the Mishkan, the sanctuary, each one of 12 days. Aaron felt bad that he wasn't included, but Hashem, God, gave him an even more important mitzvah, which was to light the menorah in the Mishkan, in the sanctuary, every night. Light the candle, light the menorah, which had 7 lights, 3 on each side facing towards the 7th. And Aaron, for reasons I'll explain a little later, was quite happy with that, quite consoled that he wasn't able to give anything to the sanctuary, dedication of the sanctuary. The Parsha then goes on to talk about the redemption of the Levium. Originally, the firstborn were supposed to be the ones serving the sanctuary, taking it apart and transporting it, but due to certain circumstances, the Levium replaced them. Among other reasons, they were the only tribe who did not participate in the worship of the golden calf. In addition, after the redemption, the Parsha then goes on to talk about preparations for the first Pesach, since the liberation from Egypt. And a number of the people could not make the offering, only for the simple reason that they were tamei, they were impure. And that was because they were carrying the bones of Yosef and his brothers through the desert. And they approached Moshe, and Hashem answered them that there would be a Pesach Sheni, which occurs on the 14th of ER, which does not have all the restrictions the other Pesach in terms of chametz. It was a second chance to bring the Korban Pesach. It was only for people who were either tamei or were so far from Eretz Israel they couldn't arrive in time to bring it. Everybody else was required to bring it on the regular Pesach. The Parsha then goes on to the dealing with the instructions for traveling, and only when the cloud of glory lifted of Hashem did they travel, and when it settled back down, they would stop journeying, whether it was for a little while or a long while. The journeys were never at night. That's when there was a column of flame that lit the whole area for the Bnei Israel throughout their 40-year journey through the desert. It then talks about the 2 silver trumpets, which were used to assemble various groups among the 3.5 to 4 million people. And it then talks about the first time the people were going to move from Har Sinai. They've been there a year, intensely learning the Torah and receiving many commandments. It describes the procedures for that, in what order they would journey. Then Yithro, the father-in-law of Moshe, showed up. He was offered to join the Jewish people in Israel, and that he'd get a share in the inheritance of the land. However, he first refused, said he wanted to go back to his own land. Moshe offers him a second time, and he does not answer. And according to Rashi and other commentators, Yithro did accept the offer. He was offered a number of places in Israel. He decided to settle around Jericho in English, and his descendants were very gifted spiritually. There is a direct connection between Jerusalem and Jericho, and when the incense was burned, the Ketores in Yerushalayim, once smelling it with a certain spiritual sensitivity, could sense if there was any problems going on with the Jewish people or not. The place that connected to was Jericho. The descendants of Yithro had the ability to sense if there was something wrong, and then came to Yerushalayim to help out and deal with whatever the spiritual problem was. The Parsha then goes on uniquely, and it has two pesukim, chapter 10, Bamidbar, pasuk 35 and 36, before any time they journeyed. And Moshe would say, the Torah would arise, Yehu Nisan Aran v'yomei Moshe Kima Adonai Yavutzu Yivarecha V'nesu Mashenechem Nifnecha V'nachach Amei Hashivu Adonai Rabos Alathei Israel, which translates, when the ark would journey, Moshe said, arise Hashem and let your enemies be scattered, that those who hate you flee from before you. And when it rested, he would reside tranquility, O Hashem, among myriad thousands of Israel. And interestingly enough, on each side of these two verses, they're an inverted nun, which I'll be speaking about more shortly. It's the only place in the entire 5 books of Moses, the Chumash, where such inverted nuns appear, and there are many reasons for it. One thing I will say now, the Parsha, these two pesukim also separate 2 sets of various sins by the Jewish people. When they were leaving Har Sinai, instead of being sad that they were learning, that they were going to be away from a place of intensity where they were going to be exclusively learning Torah, they instead decided, they acted like school children getting out at the end of the school year, as the Midrash explains, and they were just happy to get away from it. In other words, they did not value Hashem's Torah in the way they should have. And that was a sin in itself. And then after they take their first march, the Erev Rav, the mixed multitudes who went up with the Jewish people, start complaining and they're craving food. The Jewish people take up their pride. They're weeping because all they have to eat is the man, which is a special holy food that tastes like honey wafers if one is not thinking, or it could be imagined and taste like any food that anybody could think of. And Moshe then said and begged that if Hashem wasn't going to give him some help. He could not bear the demands of all of the 3.5 to 4 million people that were with him. And Hashem said, look, select 70 elders, wise men. I will give them I will give them some of the prophetic spirit you have, and they will help you carry the burden of the Jewish people. Because Moshe said, if you're not going to help me, then, remove me. Hashem said, okay, you want to be removed, you will. And he did not. Moshe ultimately did not go into the land of Israel with the Jewish people, and this was one of the reasons. Hashem did give them for meat in terms of quail, and as soon as they started eating it, Hashem punished them because they were, again, not thinking about the right things. One of the reasons for it they had left the Sinai, their concentration on Torah diminished, and therefore they were susceptible to the complaints of the Arab Rav, and were mixed multitudes, and were willing to look at material things that were really irrelevant. And now, getting back to a second about the 70 elders, each tribe was asked to select 6. That would make 72, and the 2 of them did not come with Moshe and did not get the prophetic spirit. Instead, what happened, they made certain prophecies, Eldad and Medad, and they predicted certain things that upset Gershom, Moshe's son, and also Yeshua, when he heard about them. Eldad proclaimed, for example, Moshe will pass away from this world, and Yeshua, the servant of the community, will succeed him. Yeshua will bring the land, choose the land and possess it. Medad said soon Shalav quails will come from the sea, will cover the camp, and they'll become a snare, a trap for Israel. They both proclaimed prophetically the following: that at the end of the days, Gog and Magog and their armies will battle against Jerusalem and fall on the Mashiach's hand. I believe that's Mashiach ben David. For 7 years, Bnei Israel will not need fuel because they will obtain fuel from the enemy's weapons. After the dead of Bnei Israel will be revived. That means the Tzidkias and resurrection of the dead. They will enjoy the food was stored away for the future, and they will receive due reward for their deeds. And the Parshat then continues with a very sad incident, which is at the end of the Parsha. Miriam, Aaron are speaking to Moshe and questioning him because of why he did not have a normal life with Zipporah, his wife, over the last 40 years of his life. And they questioned Moshe because both Aaron and Miriam, who were prophets, were able to have normal married lives. And yet, why couldn't Moshe? Moshe being the modest of all men in the world, that's why, in fact, he was chosen to receive the Torah, wouldn't answer him they were called, God called Miriam and Aaron outside, told them, they explained that their prophecy, they'd be warned ahead of time, and therefore, even if they were participating in marital relationship with their respective spouses, had time to purify themselves. That was not the case with Moshe Rabbeinu, because Hashem came to him panim al panim, face to face, which meant that he always had to be ready and would not have time to purify himself. And that's why he was in a different category. Miriam got saras, which was a which was a disease for speaking improper speech, which is lashon hara. You speak about somebody, even if what they're saying is true, it can be damaging to that person, whether he hears it or not. In this case, Moshe did. And she got saras for a week. Now, actually, it's an interesting question. If somebody's saying a certain speech and repeating things about somebody with a valid purpose, they shouldn't be punished. So what was going on? This is a warning. So Miriam really did not deserve saras. Why did Hashem give it to her for a week? Because to warn the people that they should not speak ill of either any person or the land of Eretz Israel, which they should have been entering. And this lashon hara with the next week's Parshat Shlach, with the whole incident of the Meraglim, the spies, they did not obey that warning with disastrous consequence for them and the Jewish people then and over the next 2,500 years, which I'll speak about more in next week's Parsha. There is two things I would like to focus on now. One of them is the first verse, first couple of verses, when Aaron was given the mitzvah of lighting the menorah. Aaron had felt bad because he wasn't included in the dedication of the gifts with the other had the other 12 heads of tribes, other than the tribe of Levi, which Aaron was the head of, and he was wondering why he was not given divine inspiration. And he felt he wasn't given it because he thought that God had not forgiven him for the sin of the not protesting the creation of the golden calf, Egel Zahav. Yet Hashem then showed it to him. It was not for that reason at all. It was because he was being given a greater mitzvah. What was a greater mitzvah? Lighting the menorah. Now, the menorah is a very interesting question. Why was the menorah needed in the Mishkan sanctuary? Because every time Moshe went in there, the Shekhinah, the light of Hashem, brightened the whole area. And it was explained that it was needed. It's not needed on many levels, but it was to show that the people had to see that divine light and realize that Hashem is the source of everything. And the structure of it was very interesting. There were 7 lights, 3 on each side, but they weren't focusing out. They were facing towards the 7th. And will give reasons for that. Now, also interesting, on a Parshat level, basic level, Aaron's blessing was far greater than that of the princes by getting that mitzvah, because the Jewish people were eventually going to sin. The sanctuary is going to be hidden, Mishkan. Eventually, the first and second temple were going to be destroyed. Yet the lighting of the menorah is something that carries on to the day, not in terms of the temple, not in terms of the temple, but in terms of Hanukkah, because it was Aaron's descendants, the Hasmoneim, who fought against the Greeks when they tried to turn the Jewish people away from Hashem's Torah. And the light of the mitzvah of the light of the menorah is the light of the menorah. We celebrate in Hanukkah for 8 days. It's a menorah with 8 lights instead of 7. That was because the miracle was 8 days, and also has other implications. Because 8 represents above nature, which would be the third temple. In any event, it's still commemorating that same mitzvah. So Aaron's reward was eternal, while that of the princes dedicating the sanctuary and the first and second temple was only temporary. Now, on a deeper level, Aaron was said by the Ramban, Nachmanides, that he was given, that what he has was a mitzvah hagadolah by lighting the menorah. And he goes on to say, Zeh Ramaz, this is the Ramah reminders to a devar, elevated thing and a profound secret. Now, what is going on here? The mitzvah is dealing with, what is it a remez to? It's a remez to the spheros, first of all. It was 10 sayings with which Hashem created the world. And what's it teaching us is that all of them are really a unity, even though the different qualities of Hashem is united and they are. And the reason they were turned in was to show that, what is it representing? It's representing the world above, where the Heikel HaKodesh, the central place of holiness, all holiness, was in the middle, and that's symbolized by the seventh light. And also, let's looking a little further at the Ner candles. It has another meaning. Now let's look at the candle or the menorahs. A menorah, even though it had 7 places to light up, if it's not lit, there's no specific significance to it. And only when it's lit, does it have a true meaning. And they say it's like the menorah without being lit with the flame is like a body without, is a body with no neshama, and only with the lighting can there be completeness. So you need guf and neshama, as explained in Tehillim, Psalms. And candle of Hashem, God, is in the Neshama of Adam, and it's teaching us that only that combination can be only when they're together. And there's three things one needs: to have the neshama, the menorah, joined with the screw, so to speak, the actual menorah itself. And there's three things needed: shemen, tzila, which is wicks, and halava, a flame. This is also teaching us another thing, that they're a unity, and so are the top three spheros, which are the more intellectual qualities of Hashem: Aketa, Chachman, Bina, wisdom. And it's teaching us, since you need all three together, this is a unity, and this is what is represented. And it's teaching us of those three. And only with that, that's representing the upper worlds and the lower worlds. So Aaron was in fact given a very splendid gift, which has significances in both the lower worlds and the upper worlds, and shows the unity of God and man and woman, and also how both the whole universe, both upper and lower, are united, that is all symbolized by this mitzvah. And part of this is in the Me'er Sinai, and I am one of the Talmidim of the Ramban and Rashba. In any event, the other pasuk I would like to focus on now is the two pasukim with the inverted nuns. Now, interestingly enough, according to, why are these nuns inverted? Because these two pasukim represent a separate book of the Torah. The two inverted nuns, among other things, are intended to signify that. Now, for many purposes, there are 5 books of the Torah, and that's how they divide it up in text. However, now, how do we know that there could be 7 parshas? Because, as it says in Mishlei, wisdom has built a house, she has hewn out 7 pillars, and they're explaining, just as there are 7 heavens, 7 regions of the world, 7 days of the week, there's 7 books of the Torah. Now, this is partially based on the teachings of the Rokeach, Rishon, one of the medieval commentators. So what would these 7 books be? The 7 books are Bereshit, Shmos, and Vayikra, the normal ones, the beginning of Bar Midbar, Numbers, until this Parsha, these 2 verses. We then go from Pasuk chapter 10, verse 37, to the end of Bar Midbar, and then the Sefer Devarim. Now, how do we know it can be? How can 2 verses be a whole book of the Torah? Other ones goes on for chapters and chapters. It's explaining that this first pasuk, chapter 10, verse 35, has 7 words, just like the first pasuk of the Torah. And the second of those 2 verses has 12 words, corresponding to the last 12 words of the Torah. Parsha ends with the word Israel, that's the Torah. That's another significance from it. And What about the letter Nun? As is explained, as a Pharisee, it includes the entire range of divine wisdom, these three verses. It ends, beginning and ends Nun, which is number 50, includes all the 50 gates of divine wisdom. How two verses can do that's beyond our ability to understand. However, that's why the Nuns are inverted. Another understanding is it says, reveal yourself, Hashem, to your enemies, which is uttered before the Aaron. Is a travel, and that expresses our belief in God's authority and providence. Now, another meaning that the Rabbeinu Bachya brings, who was a late Rishon from the medieval period in the 1300s, it's telling us something different. It's telling us that the world, it's symbolizing the 6,000 years of the world's existence, after which the world will be remade. That's the second pasuk. And the first pasuk is talking about second pasuk, the Torah, which is among other things. It says, "Aretz tohu v'bohu shechishal b'nei tehom," and then completes with Shem's spirit, red and watered. This is showing something else very significant. And how do we know, according to Rabbeinu Bachai, that it's representing the creation? It's talking about the 7,000 years, because if you look at it, the second pasuk has the letter Aleph 7 times, which hints at the 1,000 years each. Similarly, the first pasuk has 6 Alephs. And the world universe was also created in 7 days, 6 days. And therefore, it results in the whole world and the whole Torah and wisdom of Hashem being encompassed in 2 verses. Another explanation that's given according to Yaakov. Why is it given a separate book of the Torah? Another reason, because it contains the fundamental mitzvah, prove, privy, or revia, be fruitful and multiply. It's implied in the pasuk alluded to, in where it says "V'yos alfei Yisrael," and made the thousands multiply 10,000s. That's how he's understanding it. And without that mitzvah, obviously, the human race cannot grow and prosper. Now, looking at all of these, what can we take from this? From the first pasuk is the fundamentals of Hashem's creation and the unity in the higher and lower worlds. And in the pasuk of Pesukim, I just finished discussing the whole purpose of the human race, for history of the 6,000 years, in the 7,000 year when Hashem will perfect the universe, as well as the fundamental role of man and woman to benefit from the world, elevate the world of children, and bring the ultimate light, the ultimate redemption, is also symbolized by the menorah. May, as we're coming into the beautiful summer months, which has all the beauties of nature, may we appreciate their true source and realize the beautiful unity of our world and the upper worlds. Good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.